Pause for a moment and think about this. Curious. What if something as small and cheap as a little flying device, something that might cost around $50,000 to build, could end up draining the finances of the richest nation on Earth? Most people would laugh and say that sounds ridiculous. It feels like the kind of idea you would only see in a movie or a video game. But the strange thing is, a version of this situation is actually unfolding in the real world right now. Surprised. There is a country called Iran. It is not one of the wealthiest nations on the planet. It does not dominate the world with massive military power. It does not operate fleets of futuristic jets, giant aircraft carriers, or science fiction weapons. But what it does have is a strategy. And that strategy is surprisingly clever because it focuses on something simple: economics. Iran's approach is not about overpowering the United States with brute force. It is about turning numbers and costs into a weapon. Instead of a battle of strength, it becomes a battle of arithmetic. Thoughtful. And when you look at it that way, the entire situation starts to make sense. At the center of this strategy is a particular type of drone, often called the Shahed. When most people hear the word drone, they imagine small gadgets that hobbyists fly around parks to record aerial footage. Curious. This drone is different. It is simple in design, but carries explosive power. Each Shahed drone costs roughly $50,000 to produce. In military terms, that price is incredibly low. Some versions are even cheaper, closer to $35,000. Compared to the enormous budgets involved in modern warfare, this is almost pocket change. Surprised. What makes this even more remarkable is the scale of production. Reports suggest that Iran can manufacture hundreds of these drones every day. Over time, that means thousands, even tens of thousands, could be stockpiled. Exhales sharply. And despite their small size, these drones are capable of causing serious damage. A single one could target infrastructure like an oil facility, a water plant, or other critical locations. What makes this even more remarkable is the scale of production. Reports suggest that Iran can manufacture hundreds of these drones every day. Over time, that means thousands, even tens of thousands, could be stockpiled. Surprised. And despite their small size, these drones are capable of causing serious damage. A single one could target infrastructure like an oil facility, a water plant, or other critical locations. Because they are compact and relatively lightweight, they can be transported easily. A group of them could be carried in the back of an ordinary truck, hidden almost anywhere, and launched from unexpected locations. Curious. That combination of low cost, mobility, and quantity turns them into a powerful tool. Now think about how the United States defends against aerial threats. One of its systems is known as THAAD, which stands for Terminal High Altitude Area Defense. Excited. It is an advanced missile defense system designed to intercept incoming threats in the sky. But here is where the math becomes interesting. Each interceptor missile used by this system can cost around $1 million. Curious. That means destroying a drone worth $50,000 may require firing a missile that costs 20 times more. Sometimes more than one missile must be launched to ensure the target is destroyed. Imagine spending several million dollars to eliminate something that cost a fraction of that amount to build. Size. When this happens repeatedly, the financial balance begins to tilt in favor of the cheaper weapon. Another complication is that systems like THAAD are large and not easy to move. They are designed to protect specific locations rather than roam freely. Curious. Because of this, they can potentially become targets themselves. The basic idea becomes clear when simplified. One side produces thousands of inexpensive drones. Size. The other side responds with extremely expensive defensive missiles. Every time an interception happens, the cost difference grows wider. At this point, people might ask a reasonable question. Curious. If the United States is so technologically advanced, why not simply produce cheaper systems to counter these drones? Part of the explanation comes from history. During the long period known as the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union faced each other as rival superpowers. Both possessed nuclear weapons capable of catastrophic destruction, which meant a direct war between them would have been devastating for the entire planet. Instead of fighting directly, they competed by building increasingly impressive military technology. Massive aircraft carriers, strategic bombers, and complex missile systems were developed partly to demonstrate power and discourage conflict. The goal was often to show strength rather than fight small-scale battles. Thoughtful. Over decades, this approach shaped how many military programs were designed. Large, advanced, and expensive systems became the standard, but the modern battlefield is changing. Curious, smaller, cheaper technologies can sometimes create new challenges that older systems were not originally designed to handle. Another factor sometimes discussed is the economics of defense industries. Large military projects involve many contractors, engineers, and political decisions. When programs cost billions of dollars, they create significant economic activity. Thoughtful, changing that structure can be complicated. Meanwhile, in many parts of the Middle East, another issue plays a crucial role: water. In regions where rainfall is scarce, fresh water can be extremely limited. Concerned. Some countries rely heavily on desalination plants, which convert seawater into drinkable water. These facilities are vital for daily life. Without them, supplying water to cities and farms would become extremely difficult. Serious. Because they are essential infrastructure, they can also become strategic targets during conflicts. A drone strike on a major desalination plant could interrupt water supplies for large populations. Concerned. In areas where water resources are already limited, such disruptions could create serious challenges. However, Iran itself also faces environmental pressures. Size. Water shortages have affected parts of the country, and environmental changes have had visible effects. One often mentioned example is Lake Urmia, which has shrunk dramatically over the past few decades because of drought and water diversion. Another complexity within Iran is its diverse population. Thoughtful. While Persians form the largest group, the country also includes Kurds, Azeris, Arabs, and other communities. Managing such diversity can be challenging for any nation. In geopolitics, rival states sometimes look for ways to exploit internal weaknesses in their opponents. Political tensions, resource shortages, or regional divisions can all become factors in larger strategic calculations. Thoughtful. At the same time, Iran has tried to strengthen its influence beyond its borders by building relationships with groups and governments across the Middle East. Curious religious connections sometimes play a role, particularly among Shia communities, although regional politics are far more complicated than simple religious divisions. Looking at the bigger picture, many analysts believe Iran's broader strategy is aimed at shifting the balance of power in the Gulf region. Curious. This brings us to an important organization called the Gulf Cooperation Council, often abbreviated as the GCC. The GCC includes countries such as Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, and Oman. Thoughtful. These nations possess enormous energy resources and play a major role in global oil markets. Oil sales from these countries are typically conducted in US dollars. Because oil is one of the most traded commodities in the world, this practice helps maintain strong global demand for the dollar. Curious. The revenue generated by these oil exports is often invested around the world, including in financial markets in the United States. Thoughtful. When large amounts of foreign capital flow into markets, they can support investment and economic growth. If instability in the Gulf disrupted oil production or financial flows, it could create ripple effects across the global economy. Concerned energy prices, investment patterns, and international trade could all be affected. This is why conflicts in the Middle East rarely remain regional issues. Thoughtful Europe, for example, depends on imported energy, and shifts in supply can influence everything from electricity costs to industrial production. Other global powers also watch these developments closely. Russia and China both have their own strategic interests in the region and in global energy markets. Their responses often reflect broader geopolitical calculations rather than simple alliances. Thoughtful. When you step back and look at the situation, it becomes clear that modern conflicts are rarely just about soldiers and tanks. They involve economics, technology, infrastructure, energy, and even water resources. Different countries pursue strategies that reflect their strengths and limitations. Some focus on advanced technology and large defense systems. Others emphasize lower-cost tools that can create asymmetric challenges. Thoughtful. The reality is that global politics often resembles a complex chessboard. Multiple players are making moves at the same time, each trying to protect their interests and influence the future balance of power. What happens next is uncertain. International tensions, economic pressures, and technological changes are constantly reshaping the landscape. Thoughtful decisions made in one region can affect energy prices, financial markets, and security conditions across the entire planet. That is why understanding these dynamics matters. Curious headlines only show the surface of events, but the deeper story often involves layers of strategy, economics, and history. In a world where information spreads instantly and conflicts can influence millions of lives, awareness becomes incredibly valuable. The more people understand the forces shaping global events, the better prepared they are to interpret what they see in the news. Thoughtful. Thanks for spending time exploring this topic with Global Conflict Watch. If this discussion helped you see the bigger picture, share it with someone who might find it interesting. There is always more to uncover, and many pieces of the puzzle are still unfolding. Curious, stay informed, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for spending time exploring this topic with Global Conflict Watch. If this discussion helped you see the bigger picture, share it with someone who might find it interesting. Thoughtful. There is always more to uncover, and many pieces of the puzzle are still unfolding. Stay curious, stay informed, and I will see you in the next one.